The beauty of the water scenery of this part of the river struck us as surpassing anything of the kind we had ever seen. Frederick Lennox Ingle, October 17, 1829. Assigned to a government survey, Ingle's comment would be reiterated through the years. Lady Dufferin and the Marquis, one-time Governor General, trekked out from Rideau Hall to see it for themselves. The christening of Dufferin Falls concluded their visit. Straddling this water scenery, a village scratched its foothold into the Laurentian bedrock some 100 years ago. From the early days, the moods of this locale have been sung by the bells of Saint Gregoire, a landmark. This is a community whose personality has been forged by decades of die-hard struggle, times of joy, and periods of just hanging on. Grown to become the largest center in Papineau County, along its sidewalks, everyday conversations shift with ease between French and English. The city of Buckingham, population 10,000, is cradled in the valley of the Lièvre River, and the valley has nurtured her since the beginning. The waterway has known the Algonquin paddle, the song of the fur traders, the call of river drivers, who for generations, like cattlemen, have herded the bounty of thousands of square miles of the interior woodlands of Quebec. On this early morning in June, the custom lives on. This is the drive operation of the James Maclaren Company. Here, rivermen intercept logs that have run the river's 250-kilometer course. Their job is to coax the sticks by boom, pike pole, and alligator tug towards their final destination at the plant, located below Buckingham, where the Lièvre meets the Ottawa River. Of the names imprinted on Buckingham's history, Maclaren is clearly stamped. Avid Scots, James and his brother John caught the smell of fresh-cut timber along the Gatineau, Rideau, and Ottawa watersheds in the 1800s, and they were hooked. James, born in 1818, made the next logical move, connecting himself to the valley hierarchy. Historian Pierre-Louis Lapointe.
James Maclaren married Anne Sully. Now, it seems like a very ordinary marriage. Say, who the hell is Anne Sully? Well, Anne Sully, in a sense, is important, was a girl from Hull, but she's important because her sister had married Philemon Wright, one of the grandsons of Philemon Wright Jr. So that you have there a kind of a first contact, you know, the foot in the door with the royal family in Hull, in a sense.
Wright was the godfather of the 19th century lumber trade, and family ties would open many a door for the Maclarens. The animated James eventually set his sights on the Lièvre, and by 1864 had bought a sawmill on the river, previously built by pioneer Baxter Bowman. Maclaren was now on the road to creating an empire, which would eventually extend from Quebec to British Columbia, encompassing not only lumber, but railway building, mining, and financing.
One of the main roles of James Maclaren in the Ottawa River Valley, as such, is his role as founder and first president of the Lumbermen's Bank. It was called a Lumbermen's Bank, but I mean it was the Bank of Ottawa. And the Bank of Ottawa will have a separate existence as a bank up to 1922, when it's going to be amalgamated with the Bank of Nova Scotia. So that this Ottawa Valley Bank, well, James Maclaren will be president of that bank from 1874 to 1892, up to his death. And he'll be a key character in everything that's, you know, every financial operation in the Ottawa Valley.
Within 20 years of the union of Upper and Lower Canada, the landing above the falls took on significance as a holding pen for floating cargo. Sparked by the initiative of town founders Levi Bigelow and the aforementioned Bowman, sawmills were churning out product to feed the voracious American appetite, while spinning the destiny of the new settlement. It is now noon, upstream from Buckingham, and the pulp logs have reached High Falls, which at one time rivaled Niagara. Today the river is silenced, harnessed for electric power. With the payload on schedule, the drivers funnel it into a conduit for the next leg of the journey, 20 stories below. By mid-morning of the following day, the pulp logs will have arrived at a debarking plant at Pupor, 18 kilometers above Buckingham. Here, 120,000 cords are processed each season. Following the death of John Maclaren in 1876, James mortgaged his own properties in Buckingham and the Lower Lièvre to buy out his late brother's interests. Calvinist principled, he surrounded himself with his kinsmen, but never forgot his simple beginnings.
James Maclaren was very serious-minded, was a hard worker, the kind of guy that worked day and night to build his empire. Anyone who worked hard, he would respect. It's the Protestant ethic kind of man. Because he respected work, he also respected workers, the ordinary worker also. So that he would love sometimes to go into the shop himself and work with his men, just to be close to the men.
As the Maclaren clan grew in numbers, by the 1880s there were 6 sons and 2 daughters. The family influence became more widespread, the aristocracy of the Lièvre. The region's economy was bolstered with mineral finds, and this, along with the sawmills, attracted workers. Demographic scales tipped to a majority French-Canadian population, seconded by Irish. The village was now a town, with social activities centered at the marketplace. Then suddenly, in 1892, James Maclaren was gone. The death of the old man proved to be a watershed in the development of the community. In the decade that followed, on the one hand, there would be promises of a bright future, a new tomorrow. On the other hand, there would be unprecedented events that would shake the town to its very foundations. In addition to his other notations, Engel's Journal of 1829 remarked on the presence of minerals in the area. But it wasn't until the 1860s before speculation had become a serious business. Prospector-inventor Leo MacDonnell.
Mica was first started by the ordinary individual, which it was a poor man's mineral. They could take a pick and then pick it out and load it into a pack sack on their back and take it out and sell it for dollars, you see. That was the mica. When the mica started to run out, the feldspar came in.
Used in the making of porcelain and false teeth, feldspar was prized in world markets. Soon the rock of the shield would yield other deposits, including graphite for lubrication and lead pencils. For 35 years, the mining industry would flourish, and at one point overshadow the economic importance of the forest. Alan Todd.
Some of these mines were quite large. They were very labor-intensive. They would employ 300 to 400 shift workers in each one. They worked 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Feldspar was hauled from the mine by horse and sleigh to Buckingham. And the dairy mine, when it first started, it was hauled by wagon in the summertime out to the river, loaded on scows, and the boat hauled it to Buckingham. But the dairy mine, the first 5 years was worked only on the winter months and was hauled by farmers, all the farmers along the river. And they got $1.40 a ton to haul it on by sleigh, and they averaged about 3 tons to a load. They loaded their own load at the mine, and that was a distance of 14 miles there. And they get up in the morning, I'd say at 7 or 4 o'clock, maybe to leave to go up there, and they get home at 6 at night. And they'd shovel 3 ton on and 3 ton off. And that was shipped at that time, so they'd average maybe $3 or $4 a day.
Saturday evening, of course, was time to celebrate. They got paid on Saturday. They would come to Buckingham, to the local hotels, and whoop it up. And I think the comparison is that the local hotels are like the Wild West movies that we saw in our younger years.
The Wild West days have now quieted. Remaining are some of the more refined landmarks from the past. The mines at one point had kept 2,000 men on the payroll, and in a 10-year period at the close of the last century, the community's population increased by 50%. In turning the pages of Buckingham's history, it is the chapter which opens the early part of this century that spells a time of trauma, the scars of which would be long in the healing. Not every phase of modern industry is best suited to mechanization. Some things are still better done in the ways of old. And so it is that Dale Brown and his helper, Jacques Thierry, get their job done with a 2-horsepower outfit. The lièvre, which means wild rabbit or hare, is kept clear of debris and deadhead logs by a screening process at the entrance to the sluice at Dufferin Falls. Allowed to dry, the logs are then returned to the river for the last run to the mill, marking the end of this 3-day journey. At the close of the 1800s, the resource industries were key to jobs here. The mines were headed for a downturn, a twist of fate, for miners had sometimes earned double the wages of mill workers. Employment options were few. And then a new player arrived on the block. A new game came to town. A game that can only be compared in contemporary terms to something like the advent of the nuclear age. The world at that time was caught up in the Industrial Revolution, and the demand for products like matches prompted many innovations. In the case of the phosphorus manufacturing process, the Lièvre Valley was everything an ambitious entrepreneur could ask for. Apatite rock, or phosphate, had come to the surface in 1875 and piqued the interest of international investors. At High Falls, Squaw Hill, and the Emerald Mines, companies sank big money into the ground, waiting for a payoff.
The chemical engineers from Britain saw these minerals. They saw the potential for electric power on the Lièvre River. And putting that together, they felt they could do something about it, and we had the beginnings of the chemical industry. The Electric Reduction Company of Canada was formed in 1897 with British capital and British engineers guiding the way. Within 5 years, they were in operation. They were selling phosphorus on the world market, and they were undercutting a large firm in Britain by the name of Albright and Wilson, who were leaders in providing phosphorus for the European market. Albright and Wilson elected to bring a patent lawsuit against the Buckingham operation and tried to shut them down. A turn of events, they ended up not shutting them down, but buying the plant out and shutting their own operation in Britain down. And from then until 1930, all the phosphorus required in England was produced here at Buckingham, Quebec.
Irony in the making. The Albright and Wilson operation brought a sunny day, new opportunities, alternative work. Meanwhile, at the Falls, while sawmilling continued, the Maclaren operation had moved into pulp production for newsprint. But in the heat of the factory, the seeds of discontent were being cultivated. A sleepy unrest would turn into an unanticipated nightmare.
In 1901, the James Maclaren Company, which is made up of the sons of James, the 5 sons, will buy out the Ross Mill on the other side of the river, so that from that point on, there is a kind of a monopoly situation which exists on the lower Lièvre in that district. because the James Maclaren company will own outright all of the timber berths and all of the lumber slides on the river. So they'll have a pretty tight control over the lumber trade and over almost all of the good deal of the life, and of the lifeline and the economic life of the Lower Leadup district.
The cartel became a chokehold. Management lay in the control of Alex and Albert, who were colder and less sympathetic toward the ordinary worker, a contrast to their father. In the larger centers of the country, nearly 50 years earlier, labor had begun to organize to protect their interests. Maclaren workers searched for alternatives.
In 1906, what happens is that you have a very modest try by people who want to unionize. They were almost afraid of unionizing. They'd say, we don't want to form a union. All we're asking for is for the people that are only getting, $1.25 a day for a 10-hour day. We would like them to get an extra couple of cents an hour.
Maclaren employees, friends, relatives, and fellow workers joined a mutual benefit life insurance society called Union Saint-Joseph du Canada and elected a fair wages committee to present their position.
As a result of this, this very slow movement, people trying to get just a fair shake, you get John Edward Vallely, who's manager of the company, and at the same time, who happens to be mayor of the town. It's a scenario, it's an incredible scenario. There's a lockout. People always talk about the strike, but it was never a strike. It was a lockout. Okay. And in the autumn of 1906, Vallely closes the mills. He says, we don't even discuss with you people.
Demoralized by the company decision to reject mediation and the hiring of the strike-breaking Teal Detective Agency, on October 6th, employees walked to the landing to block the floating of logs downriver. The Teal men were waiting. The town reeled, by nightfall occupied by the militia. This on the request of Vallely under the Riot Act.
2 people were killed. 2 of the union executive were killed. Others were maimed or got bullet wounds. But the president of the union, Thomas Bélanger, who was only 25 years old, was really a marked man because he was shot so many times. It's incredible.
The loss of Bélanger and Union Secretary Francois Thériault, the event itself, would forever leave its mark. Blacklisting forced many families to pack and leave, never to return. As for the killings, 5 were sentenced to 6 months in prison, ending a tragic marker in the story of labor in Canada. Blotting the past out of its collective consciousness, the town moved on. Mills reopened, wounds began to heal. But before peace would reign, one more battle when the Electric Reduction Company fought a lawsuit by the Maclarens over water rights.
So now we had the Maclaren company squared off against these chemical people and the townspeople of Buckingham. And this lasted for some years until the mid-1930s. A very interesting event came about. One of the founders of the Electric Reduction Company was William Taylor Gibbs. And his only daughter in the mid-1930s married Barnett Maclaren, one of the Maclaren group. Here you had a young girl from one side and a young bachelor from the other side marrying. And I was told, I wasn't here at the time, that all the church bells in Buckingham rang out on that day. Everybody rejoiced. Not only a happy wedding, but perhaps the old animosities were dying. I think they did.
If there is a lesson in human experience that history may teach us, it is encapsulated in the expression, the gem cannot be polished without friction, nor man perfected without trials. If this is the case, then an immovable foundation has been laid for a city of the future. Frederick Lennox Ingle would have smiled. And so the drive continues. The sticks that travel this half man-made, half natural conveyor belt will become the newsprint for the morning papers in Detroit and Philadelphia. Together, the pulp and paper and the chemical industries flourish, providing an economic base for the region. That hub of Saturday activity, the old marketplace, is being restored. There is a perennial spirit here, born of the river itself, and that is the spirit of Buckingham, Quebec.